what is it about God in that process that you still believe he was there and he was involved?
That is a really good question.
Chris Wooley, how are you doing today?
I am fabulous. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yes, I'm so excited. For anybody who is new here or is just now tuning in, Chris and I actually spoke a couple of weeks ago, and we were just chit chatting, just hanging out. And Chris, your story has become one of the most fascinating stories that I've heard in a long time. What you told me when we first interacted is not even like half the story. So I'm super excited that you're back and you're here to chit chat. And something else I think is really interesting is that you are a Christian. You're
Yep.
religious. And that is unusual for growing up Fundie. I love to have people of faith on this podcast, but I think they're scared of me. I think I scare them. I think I scare people away.
I
Maybe
can't
it's
believe that you scare people away. You're so easy to talk to.
thanks. Yeah, I just and so I'm hoping that when people hear your story and they see how I feel like we vibe, I feel like we vibe well, they'll be more inclined to either if they're an atheist, talk to more religious people, or if they're religious, talk to more atheists or talk to me or whatever. But anyway, enough from me. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What are you about?
Oh, I'm Chris Wooley. I'm a comedian based out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Um, I am 3 years sober, and
Hell yeah.
yeah, that was a tough one. Weed, alcohol, cocaine. That was my past for 13 some odd years, and
Wild.
to finally have it behind me is a good feeling.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to tell you, last time we spoke and you got on camera, I was surprised because usually I've looked up my guests and people I talk to, and I was like, I didn't recognize him. That's so strange. And then I looked at your email icon, and
Oh,
it's you from how much weight have you lost?
a total of 360 pounds.
That yes. And I was like, that's why I didn't recognize him because like I had seen your icon and you look like a different person. Tell us about it. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I've always struggled with weight loss or weight my whole life. I was always the big kid in class. I was always one of the tallest, and got picked on brutally when I was in elementary, middle school, and then about 18, I started drinking consistently. Every night, I would have about a liter of rum, if not
Jeez.
more. And yeah, it was bad.
That's so much rum.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I should have been a pirate because my choice was rum. Like
Wow.
I loved it. But so I met a guy in college. We ended up drinking every night, and that kind of continued on when I met my wife, girlfriend at the time. She liked uppers, things that kept you up, and I liked the downers. I like to drink. I like weed, and so we got together and we stayed on that course until about 2019ish, 2020.
Wow, that's so recent.
Yeah, yeah, it hasn't had a lot of lapse since then. Actually, I had to get sober for my weight loss surgery. I ended up getting up to 570 pounds in 2019, and I
Wow.
was actually told by a comedy club owner that I was too fat to perform on his stage. And
Really?
and I was like, too fat to be a comic? Have you heard of like Ralphie May or John Candy
Yeah.
or Gabriel Iglesias? Like all
Yeah.
these really big comedians that are big, like they're household names now. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so he kind of like put that fire under me to do something about it, you know.
What was his
So
reasoning? Like, did he literally mean you were too heavy for the
I
stage? Or did
think
he
he
think
meant I was too heavy for the stage and that it wasn't reinforced, and he was scared that I was going to crack the wood or something or just fall through the
wow.
stage. Actually, funny
Wow.
story. When I was about 450, um, I was doing a show at the House of Blues, which used to have a comedy zone based out of it in Myrtle Beach. And so Carl C.J. Jones, he's a skinny dude. I was up before him. I was featuring, and it was on a like a makeshift platform, kind of a raised platform, but it wasn't sturdy at all. And I was concerned about it the entire time because as a heavier set guy, you're kind of worried about what you're standing on if it's not flat ground with earth below you. So
Yeah.
I did not 25, 30 minutes, got off. 5 minutes into his set, stage collapse. Like part,
Are you serious?
it was section stages, so like it was several platforms like side by side to make up the entire stage, and one of those platforms just went boop.
Wow. So
Yeah,
that was like a genuine threat. Like he wasn't just being a dick. He was just like, "Hey, listen."
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So
And so
so that kind of sparked me into like maybe I need to do something about it because up until this point, at even at 570, I was I had just recently became a diabetic. It
wow.
wasn't like I had a history of it.
Wow.
So I had high blood pressure, sleep apnea, diabetes, and all these symptoms just came on all at once
Wow.
within like a year or two of losing the weight. So I got surgery and I lost 360 pounds in MUSC down in Charleston, South Carolina. They did a write up about me actually being one of their most successful patients.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah,
That's really cool.
but I
And
had
that
to
was
get sober for the surgery.
yeah, so you had to get sober and you had to lose weight in order to get that surgery.
Yeah, yeah. So I had to. They tested me for nicotine in my blood. They tested me for marijuana, alcohol, and I had to go see a psychiatrist
Yeah,
for the surgery.
I'm surprised about the nicotine. I didn't know that they test you for nicotine too.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that either. But it was they had to test for it because apparently nicotine in cigarettes or whatever they will slow down the healing process um, after surgery.
Wow, that's wild. And so within all of this going on, you're dealing with addiction, you're dealing with weight loss, you're dealing with a career in comedy, which for anybody who's unfamiliar is a whole thing on its own. I was
Yeah,
telling somebody the other day, I feel like stand-up comedy is the most abusive relationship you'll hopefully ever be in your whole life.
right.
You know, it is, and it's that ex that you have issues with the rest of your life, even when you leave him behind. Yeah, that's
Always. I always
always,
go back to it. No matter how
always.
bad of a show I had or how pissed I am, I'm like,
Yes.
but I need you.
Yes, yes, or like whenever you're like, oh, I hate comedy, but whenever somebody else is like, yeah, you hate comedy, you're like, how dare you talk about them that way? Like, how
Yeah,
dare you?
don't you dare talk
Don't you
about that.
dare! You don't know us like I know us. Um, so among all of this, were you a Christian at the time? Did you become a Christian? Like, how did that fit into this narrative?
So I grew up a Christian. Always went to church. Always a part of the church, but it was more of a this is what you do on Sundays. This was the only interaction with the church outside of schooling, I guess. So I had very few friends in school, really, because I got picked on so much. So I wanted outside activities, and outside of sports, it was church. So I grew up in the church, and it just seemed like that was the thing to do. It
Yeah,
wasn't really a personal relationship with Jesus or God. It wasn't like that's I longed for it. I desired for it. I actually went to a Christian school in eighth grade, and it was solely because uh, I was getting in so many fights in sixth grade and seventh grade that my parents were like, it's either military academy or Christian school. And I was like, well, let's
yeah.
get some Jesus. Hallelujah.
Wow,
So I ended up
wow,
going to Christian school. But my wife, she was addicted too. She was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And uh, I think it was Jan- January or February of 2019, she decided to get clean. And
wow.
she like me, grew up in the church. But it was a thing to do for her as well. and we both strayed away from it once we got out of our parents' house.
Yeah.
But when she got clean, she rededicated her life and got baptized. Really started diving into the Word, and me, I was a little bit more stubborn, and I continued to use and drink, used behind her back, but drank
Oh.
in front of her and at night, and she refrained from it. But if it wasn't for her initially starting that process of rededicating her life and getting sober, there's a good chance I wouldn't be here today because of the complications that I was going through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so when she first decided, like, I'm gonna go kind of on this journey, this rededication, were you for it? Were you kind of bummed out by it? Were you concerned how it was going to impact your journey, or were you all for it? What were your feelings at the time?
To be honest, I was kind of like upset because I liked the lifestyle that I was living. Um,
Mm,
it was not a good lifestyle, but at the same time, I was having fun, and I didn't want anything to come in between that, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when she decided to do that, I was like, I honestly thought it was going to compromise our relationship. Like
Truly, yeah.
we had
Truly.
been we got married in 2010. So at that time we had been married for about 9 years,
Yeah.
and our daughter was about 6 at the time.
Yeah.
But none of it was taking place in front of her.
Yeah.
It was after she went to bed or behind closed doors. We made sure that we weren't getting messed up enough for her to notice.
Wow.
And
That's wild.
yeah, yeah. So I thought it was going to hinder our relationship, and my wife didn't really push the issue that much. It was just something that she felt in her heart that she needed to do, and I guess she eventually knew that I would come around to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I saw the
Interesting.
impact that it was having on her, I was like, "There's got to be something to it." I
Yeah.
she had acne when she was drinking and smoking, and her acne was clearing up. She started being more optimistic than I remember, just having better days and sleeping better. And I went to a sleep apnea, like a sleep doctor, where they measure you for sleep apnea and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had 700 events of going to sleep and then waking up, going to sleep and then waking up throughout the night.
Whoa.
And each one of those events could have been a case where I didn't breathe anymore.
No, literally, my dad died of a heart attack due to sleep apnea. That's like, it's a
Really?
real thing. Yeah, he was healthy. He was super healthy. So I can't even imagine with, drugs and alcohol and weight involved and things like that, like how deadly that could have been every night for you.
Yeah, every night
Wild.
for years.
Wild. And I think it's also amazing that your relationship weathered the storm because, you hear about people even just losing weight and their relationship dynamic changing so much, let
I'm a part
alone.
of several support groups for the weight loss
Yeah.
surgery that I had, and it's a constant thing on those forums where you see my husband left me or my wife left me because they feel inadequate now that you are making better strides for yourself.
Right, right, and you're doing it on 4 different planes of existence, you're coming at it from, like, from alcohol, from substances, from weight. That's amazing. And so, what was it that turned the tides for you and made religion less of a, "This is what we do," or, "I'm doing this because it's helping my wife," to, "This is something that means a lot to me, and it means enough to me to make it pretty much part of your brand at this point."
Yeah, so I saw how it was affecting my wife, how the Lord was working in her life and just blossoming it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really doing wonders, and I was like, I was just looking from the outside in, and I was like, I want that. I feel like I need it, and so I started making sure that we went to church. I started making sure that I I was watching what I was saying. I was no longer saying GD or the F word. I was really trying to watch my language, still cussing like a sailor, but I was being more mindful of it, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially around the daughter.
Yes.
Yeah, and so once I started the process of making sure that I was going to get this weight loss surgery, I think it was about August where I went in for a consultation. And I went to this one place, and they were like, "You're too big. You got to go to MUSC down in Charleston because they're the ones that specialize in more morbidly obese people." So I went down there, found out that I needed to get started getting tested for the nicotine, the alcohol, the weed, and things like that. And alcohol was easy to cut because I knew that
Interesting.
that was going to be like easily testable. And the nicotine, I didn't find out that they were testing for nicotine until that first go around. So I was like, all right, I got to cut out cigarettes. So I cut the cigarettes out. And then weed, I had to quit weed because I wanted to get it done, but I was using those little vape pens,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
and it wasn't even like it wasn't marketed like on the market. It was like what's the name for it? Bootleg
Yeah, I was
pins,
gonna
I
say, like,
guess.
backdoor bootleg. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't like a brand that was putting it out. And so when I found out that some people were having like major complications because of those, I was like, all right, I got to ditch those. But it took six 6 months to come out of my system because THC sticks to your fat cells. And at
Oh,
570
yeah.
pounds, I got a lot of fat cells
Yeah.
for them to hold on to. And I was, even though I had a regular job up until COVID, I mean, I had morning, noon. I would take a break from work, run home on my lunch break, smoke as much as I could, and then haul tail back to work. Um,
Wow. And did you quit cold turkey? Did you quit all this stuff cold turkey, or did it take a minute?
uh, Coke took a minute. Um, Weed and alcohol, I did quit cold turkey. Coke took a second just because that's usually getting out of your system in like 3 days, unless you
Yeah.
use it a ton. And
Yeah.
and I still made sure my bills were paid. I couldn't do
Yeah.
it a ton, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
still like every night. Just not the amount that I could do affordably.
Yeah. And did the withdrawal have any physical impact on you? Because honestly,
Yeah,
that would probably be what scares me the most is the withdrawal harming you at that weight more than the actual product harming you
yeah.
when you're that
So
large.
my wife, I watched her shake. I watched her have cold sweats
Wow.
at night, and while I was staying up and doing my blow, I would see her just withdrawing, and it scared the crap out of me.
Wow. That's wild. And did you ever have similar withdrawals, or were you
I
lucky in that
honestly
regard?
don't know. I don't remember. It was.
Yeah.
I think I may have weaned myself off of it enough to where over a time I didn't have those withdrawals
Mm.
because from the time that she got sober in like February to August, it was just me on the bottle now. So instead of, and it wasn't as fun because she wasn't there with me.
Yeah.
She wasn't partaking. We didn't have any friends over partaking and stuff like that. So it was, I see it now that it was a gradual decrease to the point that I didn't do it anymore just because I
Mm.
wasn't having fun with it anymore.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, I can totally see how watching your partner basically thrive without that stuff makes you really not want it. It makes it extra not fun to do
Yeah,
it anymore.
you look at her and then you look at your reflection and you're like, I probably feel like crap compared to
Yeah.
what she just got a full night's rest and she's waking up all optimistic. Hey, honey, I feel great. It's a new day, and I'm like,
I'm like, how can you feel great on a day like this? This day feels like
yeah, it's
shit.
Monday. You're supposed to
Yeah.
feel crappy.
Yeah. And so somebody who's non-religious might say, it sounds like you put in all the work. So, what is it about God in that process that you still believe he was there and he was involved?
That is a really good question. Because I really haven't given it that much thought, but I would say that I wasn't able to do it on my own.
Mm,
Even though it may look like I did, I really think it was that personal relationship where I could feel I could feel in my mind that I was changing,
yeah,
and I knew it was nothing that I was doing.
right. Interesting. And so it was almost like you felt as though even though your physical body was doing it, the guidance you needed in order for your physical body to do it came from God. Would that be like
Yeah,
a
that's more of a better way of looking at it. Like
yeah,
I would have this void that I felt like alcohol and all these drugs were filling, and when I started letting go of that, I could I could feel his presence more. I could feel his work in my life really going harder than ever before,
yeah.
it made me feel like I was on the right path.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in your opinion, in your personal experience, what feels like God? What are some examples of times where you're like, in my opinion, that felt like God there, or that felt like God speaking to me?
I have never audibly heard God.
Mm,
A lot of people say, "I heard God talk to me," and da 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 da, and that's all well and good for him, for them. But I've never audibly heard God.
got
Um,
it.
I just feel like your conscience. I guess we all have a conscience. We all know right from wrong, and um, and really, I think that's God pulling on your soul. Like he's the one saying, you know, this is wrong, step away from it, and start down the path of what you know is right, because it's these are really good questions.
Thank you. And we
Yeah,
can we
I
can we can pause if you need to like think about it, or we can move on to something else if you want to think about it more and come back to it.
no, I guess it is like knowing that right from wrong, and doing, and when you actually do what's right, you feel that sense of that's what God would do, because he
Yeah,
ultimately loves us.
interesting. And so when say for example you are doing something that you feel like would be against what God would prefer or what God would want, what does that feel like and what are the thoughts that go through your head versus when you're doing something? Because I guess my question is, how do you know what God wants you to do and how do you know what he doesn't want you to do? Is it a feeling that you get when you're doing these activities, or is it like you've literally read in the Bible the rules that apply to those things?
So how do I know what I'm doing is in God's will?
Yeah. So for example, like there obviously aren't any verses on how to behave doing stand up or how to behave on the internet because those things weren't around back then. So how do you know when you're doing them in a way that God would prefer versus if he wouldn't?
So there's several examples in the Bible that actually tell us how you're to conduct yourself, in behind closed doors and out in public.
Right.
Integrity is a big one.
Mm,
So somebody shouldn't hear me or see me doing something out in public that I wouldn't do behind a closed door.
got it.
You're supposed to be the same person no matter what. And in Titus, it actually that's what the one of the books that I'm in right now. It basically says to be a leader. These are the things that you should follow. Um, and then, of course, we have the Ten Commandments. You shouldn't steal, murder, commit adultery. So, given these guidelines, those are kind of the attributes, and then you also have um, the oh shoot, it's the fruits that you're supposed to live by.
The
So
fruits of the
there's
spirit.
several examples in the Bible of how you should conduct yourself accordingly, throughout the whole entire scripture.
Yeah. And do you feel like part of it is kind of a guessing game, or do you feel pretty solid in your decision making as you're doing it?
Absolutely solid, because
Good.
when now I'll give you an example. So even though I was doing right in my life, like stopping the drugs, stopping the alcohol, and this, that, and the other, I was still in a dead end job that wasn't progressing me anywhere.
Right.
And I knew there was more for me. I just didn't know how to achieve that. So once I actually started down that path, I started tithing, which it calls us to do. I started diving into the word and learning how to pray again. And so I lost my job, which I was like, how, God, if I'm doing all these things
Yeah.
the way that I think I should, why would you condone me losing my job? Why put me and my family in this situation?
Yeah.
Um, but then COVID hit, and that's why one of the reasons I lost my job. But I ended up making three times the amount of money on COVID relief than I was actually working.
Interesting.
So I ended up making a ton of money during COVID, looking for a new job. Then I had my surgery in July of 2020. So, in the height of COVID, at the beginning of all this going on, I was making money. I got my surgery, which allowed me to lose weight. And then come around December, I was like, all right, I got to start looking for a job. And so I prayed heavily on that. And my wife actually was putting in job applications online without me knowing, to different places. And I got a call one day, and it was for a job that I have now, and it blew my other one out the roof.
Wow. So
I
not only were you able to like basically take that time off and get the surgery and like heal yourself with more money than you would have had if you'd stayed employed, but then you were able to get a job that was even better than the one that you at the time wished you hadn't been laid off from.
Yeah. So God's timing is really perfect. You may not understand it, and it sucks that bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
But when you look back on it, you can see the how it came about, the development of it.
Right.
Because for a lot of people, if they're in a crappy situation, no matter what situation you're in, you can look back and just be like, at this point was the either the decline or the increase to whatever situation you're in.
Right.
Had I
Right.
never met this person at this exact time, these certain events wouldn't have happened to lead down this path.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in your past, when you were doing drugs and you were drinking, do you think that was because you were ignoring signs that God was trying to show you? Or do you think it had more to do with maybe, or do you believe that God steps back and lets people make decisions and learn from mistakes? What do you think
Oh,
happened there?
if you're not actively seeking him and actually doing things that, because he'll always knock on the door, but it's you that has to let him in.
Mm,
So I believe God will step back and just be like, all right, you want to continue down this path. Um, this is going to be a hard lesson, but here it is. And and it's because of those lessons that you actually have a testimony.
got it. Interesting. And so for say for example me, like I am an atheist, right? And even though we have the same moral codes, like I'm never going to murder anybody, I'm never going to assault anybody in any way, I'm not going to steal, do you think that the moral compass that I have was still given to me by God, but I just don't follow him? Or do you think that that believers and non-believers have the same moral compass for a variety of reasons?
Well, I think that to have that moral compass, you have to have a knowledge of what's good
Mm,
or what's bad. Um, Otherwise, I mean, if I was an atheist and I had that belief, I would just be like, well, this life doesn't matter. Why not just kill somebody, or or why not just have relations with anybody? I mean,
Mhm.
if there's no consequences to my actions other than what I suffer on this world, what why do anything?
And how do you think we learn good and bad? Do you think that comes from multiple places, God being one of them, or do you think that comes from only God? What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I think it comes from God, because there's got to be a foundation of good to know what bad is.
Interesting. So like the foundation of good is what comes from God, and then the decisions that you make to be good kind of come from you, but with the moral compass that was given by God. If
Yeah.
I'm, and I was gonna say, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Um, when we were supposed to interview last time, I was actually doing a live conversation event that I'm a part of, where four Christians and four atheists have live discussions on stage, and
Oh.
actually that topic was, can you be good without God? And the Christian who was speaking that night was saying how he believes that the reason that there is such a common moral compass, like don't steal, don't murder, don't rape, don't do these things, is because he believes that because all human beings were created by God, they were all given that same moral compass by God, whether or not they chose to use it to believe God or not, to follow God or not. Because one of the audience members asked about, tribes and things that have never heard of Jesus, they've never heard of Christianity. Why is it that they also a lot of times follow the same moral compass, like you don't kill your other tribes members for no reason, and that was his point. And so I was just curious if maybe you agreed with that
Hmm.
perspective.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I mean that would make sense. And I am absolutely horrible at those discussions. So don't don't even ask me to be a part of one of those, because I mean I feel what I've gone through, and I feel
Yeah.
my testimony. But as far as being able to back it up, like somebody like Frank Turek, or somebody that a lot of atheists and Christians know for defending their faith, like all I can tell you is it worked for me, and
Yeah.
I can feel it still working.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
but that's
Yeah.
about it.
Well, and something that surprises people, I am openly an atheist, but I believe people about their relationship with God. I believe them. I try to use the example. I've probably said this 10 times on this podcast, but I like to use the example how when some people eat cilantro, they taste cilantro, and other people taste soap.
I got
Neither
you.
one of them are lying, neither one of them are wrong, but neither one of them know what the other one's talking about. Right.
Right.
So when a Christian tells me like I really felt God in that moment, I 100% believe that that's what they felt, that they felt God. I just personally have never felt God or never seen what I needed to personally see in order to believe, if that makes sense.
No, no, no. I get you. And one of the things that I tell people, as far as like atheists or non-believers, whoever, I now that I read the word, and I study it. I mean, I one of the things that I point out is looking at the human body. So as far as like uh what is it? Evolution.
Hmm?
So as far as evolution, I could never believe that a single cell organism comes from nowhere, really, and then eventually over millions or billions of years creates such a intricate life form such as us, to where if things were out of scope just barely, nothing would work right.
Right.
It's so precise, um, and I like science. I love science. It was one of my best subjects in school. But we have science that or math that actually can prove how the slightest little change in something
Oh yeah.
will distort everything.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I
And I
think
just
we see it in even birth, even like animal birth, human birth. We see like one slight chromosomal change negatively impacting whether or not that creature survives or how it lives. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and I just don't think something as intricate as us or anything that math can prove was just like just an accident.
Got it. Do you believe that creation happened and then people evolved, or animals or creatures evolved from there? Or do you believe, what are your thoughts in terms of where creationism begins and evolution ends?
Okay, so I believe that there was a Big Bang.
Yeah,
I believe that a Big Bang happened.
got it.
However, that was God speaking into existence, time,
Got it.
matter, and all that. And for that to happen, boom, everything happened.
Got it.
Um, so
So
it was there.
got it. So where most people would argue, the Big Bang happened, no, creationism happened. You're saying creationism was the Big Bang. That
Yeah.
was the moment of interesting. I've never heard anyone say that, and now that I'm thinking about it, that's actually an interesting point. Like, I've never heard anyone take that stance before. Very
So
interesting.
they've had time, matter, all that had to be created at some point.
Right.
It just wasn't out there floating around waiting to happen. It was boom. That was the Big Bang, I think.
Interesting. Interesting. And so, to kind of deviate just a little bit, how does your faith now impact your stand up, or does it impact your stand up?
It impacts it hugely,
How
hugely.
so?
Because I used to have joke. I mean, there was nothing off limits whenever I started out with comedy. I thought the edgier you could be, the funnier you are, and
Didn't we all? That was all of
uh,
us at one point, I feel like.
it was horrible. Well, at first I thought I was going to be like Mitch Hedberg or Stephen Wright, just
Yep.
a one liner. And I found out that if you have a lot of one liners like that, it's hard to remember all your one liners. It's
Yes. I've never been a one liner comic ever. It is hardcore.
I sucked at it, but I had a lot of one liners about the same topic, which when I started out was my weight. It was self deprecation. So when I had all these one liners, I would segue them together, which made it look like I was telling a story.
Right. Just becomes a set, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, nothing was off the table. I had jokes about my drugs and alcohol and what I was going through. I had rape jokes
Wow.
and none of this was like at anybody else. It was
Right.
all self-deprecating to me.
Right.
Even the rape jokes, like the joke was if you have a spouse that you want to find out if she's got a sense of humor. This is key. She has to have a sense of humor because you tell this joke to where this might be the last joke that you tell. Just have a little fun and go up behind you. I go up behind my wife and I'll be like, "Hey, baby, you want to play rape?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "That's a good start." But it was
I see what you did there.
stupid. I
Yeah.
mean, but it was about me and the wife. I'm not
Right.
condoning anybody going
Right.
out there and doing it. That's a
Right.
horrible thing to do.
Right. Like, even then, you're like, I'm not going to condone rape. Like, that's not what I'm out here to do.
Yeah. It,
Yeah.
if you're taking jokes in a comedy club seriously and to heart, unless a comic is up there saying, "This is what I do. If you don't like it, go home." Like you
Which, believe it
should.
or not, some I've seen some, but it never goes well. It's never followed by a successful set. Like, never.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
go viral for being good.
No, not at all. But at the same time, I would have these jokes in place, expecting people to know that they were jokes and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's a bad assumption to have.
Right.
But when I rededicated my life, I still was doing those jokes. It didn't happen just like God said, nope, can't do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't flip like a light switch right there.
Right. You
So
can't just write new content overnight, usually.
Yeah, well, I didn't even have any desire to turn clean for a while.
Interesting.
I was thinking, yeah, that's comedy. Nothing on the comedy stage affects my religion, my faith. This is the two are separate.
Right.
That's my persona on stage that I'm playing.
Right. Right.
Um, and then I slowly started to get more into the word and stuff, and the Great Commission, which tells us that we're supposed to be disciples making disciples, spreading the seed. It might fall on some concrete, might fall on some soil, but the words and actions that you say have an impact on somebody somewhere that's listening and watching what you're doing.
Right.
So then that started to resonate with me, and I was like, man, I'm really out here living a double life.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm not the same person. I don't have that integrity that shows me in church on Sunday, uh, and then you come to a comedy show and you're like, whoa, that it's not. So Frank Turek actually says this: if somebody plays Mozart bad or Beethoven bad, who do you blame? Do you blame Beethoven or do you blame the person portraying Beethoven? So we're
Interesting.
all supposed to portray Jesus as the best that we can, but none of us are Jesus. We all fall short. So if most people have been hurt by Christianity or they've been hurt by the church, and it's human to err. It's human to sin, and we all mess up. But you should always be striving to do better and and to not make the same mistakes. I make the same mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit it. But when I started thinking about the words and actions having an impact, I felt it in my heart to change my material.
Yeah.
So immediately, I was headlining, and immediately I was like, "Can't tell the rape joke, can't tell the pedophile joke, can't tell this joke, can't tell that joke,"
Yeah.
and I went from hour and a half material to like 30 minutes. I
Yeah.
immediately cut myself back down to feature.
Interesting. Oh, and that's wise too, to do that to yourself, to be like, I'm not even gonna accept any headlining gigs because of I don't have enough
Yeah.
time to fill.
Yeah,
Wow.
but I was like, I was taking it in baby steps. So I was like, all right, I'm not gonna be like uh whatever comic is so filthy out there that I can condone this much or allot myself this much time. I'm gonna keep it TV clean. So any Christian household that would turn on their TV, uh they would hear these same things come out. So therefore it's not quite what I would be in church, but it's what most everybody's subjected to if they watch regular television.
Yeah, that's so funny that you say that because during when I'm teaching stand-up classes, there's always a conversation about the difference between clean and TV clean. And like,
Yeah,
what does that mean? That's so funny that you say that.
yeah. So, and that's one thing that I always bring up on my podcast is the difference between uh, TV clean and church clean,
Yes. Yes.
or even there's even a further line between church clean and then dry bar clean.
Really? Dry bar is
The-
that clean?
oh yeah.
I've never been. I've never done anything at dry bar.
So I haven't either. I haven't had that ability yet,
Yeah.
but I have interviewed several people that say some of the things that they talk about in church on church shows they can't do on dry bar shows because let's say
Really?
you have a little self-deprecate or a little wife deprecation or spousal deprecation or whatnot joke. They do not condone that in dry bar.
Really? I'm shook by that.
Yeah,
That's interesting. And for anybody unfamiliar, Dry Bar is it's a club and it's also a brand of comedy specials that are marketed as clean comedy specials. So you know whenever your headliner's been on Dry Bar, they had a Dry Bar special, or whenever you go to watch Dry Bar, that it's going to be clean content. Um,
family, all age, family
yes.
friendly, clean
Yes.
content.
And one thing I will say is as much as like quote unquote clean or quote unquote church comedy gets it like a bad rap, I think that's actually a fantastic exercise just as a writer to see if you
Yeah.
can take the content that you write and either make it clean or write clean content because it's hard to do. It's very hard to do. Like anybody can write a poop joke, anybody can write a dick joke. You say poop, people are gonna laugh regardless.
Yeah.
But to write clean, even if you don't have any interest in necessarily being on clean shows all the time, is hard to do.
Oh yeah,
So,
and I
yeah.
still have a struggle with it to this day. Even though so now I've got one more date that I've committed to at Kazi's in Virginia or
Mhm.
somewhere. that is featured, and so I'm still doing the TV clean material. I'm not
Yeah.
cussing, but the
Yeah.
content, I'm still talking about the alcohol, the cocaine, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's about my previous experience.
Right. Right.
I'm not condoning it or advocating for it. I'm telling my story, so it happens to be in there, but it can't
Yes.
fly in a church setting.
Right. Yeah, like I have a bit that I call TV clean where it's about drugs, but it's about how I don't do drugs because I don't have room in my budget. I'm not condoning doing drugs. I'm just talking about how expensive they are to get into.
Right.
But still, certain words and certain subjects, they say no drugs, no sex, no this and that and the other. Like that means none, even if it's,
Yeah.
an anti joke.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So after this prior committed date, I'm eliminating anything that I wouldn't be able to say in church. Um,
Wow.
yeah, which I did 20 minutes. So that's 10 more minutes cut. And
Yeah.
the sucky thing is that I don't have any of this like as a special that I used to do. I don't have an
Yeah.
hour special out there saying this is the old me. And so it's like the past 12, 13 years are just gone.
Just
That
wiped off
was
the map.
that was just to give me stage presence experience.
Yes. Yes.
And now the real
Interesting.
grind starts.
That's wild. And like, I know that a lot of people listening may not have all the context, but that's for anybody listening who's unfamiliar with how stand up works. That is hard to do. You're essentially saying, I have written 12 books that nobody is ever going to see. And now I'm writing a new book that I hope people like.
Yeah, yeah, it's like taking those 12 books that you've written and just be like, all right, let's make a fire.
Yes. Yeah. No, literally. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Let's keep this house warm for a little bit. Hopefully, the rest, wow. And so, do you have any like common misconceptions maybe for people who maybe about Christianity, about Christian comedians, about like anything that you might want somebody to know who is listening that might be an atheist or agnostic?
So
Anything
I
you'd
always
say?
make it a point and just be like, for some reason, people think a Christian or a clean comedian, oh, we don't have fun. It's
Yeah.
all this like walking around like a monk or
Yeah.
something like that.
Chastity belt.
Yeah. Or always in a state of amen, something like that. Like we have fun.
Yeah.
It's we're fun to talk to.
Yeah.
We can have beards and muscle bound shirts and stuff. I mean, we look like everybody else. There's not
Yeah.
like a halo over us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Definitely.
Sydney, if you wanted to say any word in the book except for GD, please don't say
Oh,
GD.
I won't
But
say. No, I don't like
but
that anyway.
I mean, any other word. I mean, we have to be in society. We have to be able to listen to it.
Yeah, yeah, and the interesting part is too, I've been on show in multiple showcases with dry bar comics, and they're funny. They're
Yeah,
funny people.
it's a
It's
common misconception that clean comics or Christian comics are boring.
yeah, like our common connection is my comedian friend Drew Davis, and we
Yeah.
actually co-founded the Clean Comedy Collective here in Nashville,
Oh,
Tennessee.
you
Yeah,
you were a co-founder.
I was one of the 4 until I retired from stand-up. Yeah, yep.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Yeah, and so, like but it was very similar to kinda what you describe, where even though I was one of the founders, because I wanted there to be more clean comedy around, I also wasn't always doing clean comedy, and so I remember and I don't even get that raunchy, I really don't, like, I don't tell any raunchy jokes whatsoever, but I very much like we were talking about earlier, I do have jokes about drugs, I do have jokes about my family, I make a couple Arkansas incest jokes, stuff like that, like, I remember thinking, do I need to tell people when they book me to specify if they want the little clean comedy collective Sydney or do they want regular Sydney? Again, not that
Right.
different, but like I might drop the F bomb in a set that's usually the same for a clean comedy set, but like I say shit a lot. Like once I was hired to do a clean show and literally as I was walking up on stage, I tripped, I hit my knee and I went shit and like it was the beginning of the show, like right out of the gate. I was the host for the evening. Um so like I do think there is a value there and I want people to know like clean comedy is so funny. It's like any other comedy. It's like saying well, regular comedy is funny. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes
Oh, I
regular
know a
comedy.
lot of regular
Yes.
comedy that is not funny
Right.
whatsoever.
Like, I'm not saying they'll never see bad, clean comedy, but they'll also see bad, regular comedy. Anyone who's ever been to an
Yeah.
open mic will see more bad comedy than they will see good comedy.
See,
Just
I think
statistically.
when you talk about regular comedy and then like clean comedy, people think like, all right, picture being out in an open field and you have the ability to run around. And even if you wanted to step outside of that field and continue running, you can go wherever you want. That's a regular comic set, is the ability to go wherever you want. But once you put that parameter of clean, then some people feel like I'm in a cage. I can't think outside of this box. And that's where creativity and word usage really comes into play, because you still have the ability to go anywhere,
Yeah.
um, but in a more creative way or innuendo-ish way. I mean, there's certain innuendos that won't fly on dry
Right.
bar,
Right.
um, or in church, but you can still get the point across without having to be dirty about it.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes innuendos, most of the time, I think, innuendos are actually even funnier than the real words.
Yeah,
Like, the
yeah.
creativity people come up with to convey those, I think, usually are more creative and funnier than using the actual terminology that you're trying to avoid. Um, Very interesting. And so, where do you see yourself in the next 5 or 6 years? Do you see yourself do you think that there's room for you to grow as a Christian, as a comic? Like, do you see those things staying hand in hand? Like, where do you see it going for you?
So I believe there's always room to grow, in any aspect of your life.
Yeah.
If you've completed something, it, you haven't. There's always room for growth, unless you're Elon Musk and you just got anything that you want.
That's
But so the next 5 years, I'm working on a book, about my life experiences, and and I'm wanting to get into public speaking. For some reason, I've just always had, I guess because I was bullied so much as a kid, um, I hate to see other people in the same situations that I was, whether it's bullying, drugs,
right.
alcohol, weight.
Right.
I just want to help people, and so I feel like maybe getting into public speaking, speaking
Yeah.
engagements would be a good path to move down. Um,
Yes.
because I feel like that's my ultimate goal. I don't want this job anymore. I'm tired of this job that I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to help people and not have to live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
Whether that's spreading my message through my comedy, spreading my message through speaking engagements. I just I don't want to have to try and make somebody else rich anymore.
That's a that's a great way to put it. Do you think that your message that you would deliver to people, would that be heavily centered on faith as well? Is that part of what you had in mind, or would it be more like, this is what I did to get my health back in line, and then if anybody's curious, I can tell you about my faith?
Yeah, I think the latter. Just because I talk a lot on my podcast. Even though it's Christ and comedy, and a lot of the people that I talk to are Christians. Um, they don't label themselves a Christian comedian. A lot of them
Big
don't even
difference.
label themselves a clean comedian.
There is such a big difference between a Christian comedian and a clean comedian and just mainstream comedian.
Just
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, look at Nate Bargatze. He's an excellent example. I don't know if he's a Christian, but he definitely doesn't label himself a clean comedian. But if
Right.
you watch any of the stuff that he's on, I listened to a 3 hour Joe Rogan podcast with him as the guest, and
Wow.
he didn't cuss one time, and he was
Really?
funny the entire time.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. As
He's
as much as
he's one
I
of my newest
curse the
favorites.
name of Joe Rogan. Curse the name of Joe Rogan, but I'll watch Nate because he's a local. He's a Nashville boy. But
Yeah, yeah, but I mean,
interesting.
I didn't even pick up on that until I watched one of his specials, and then I was like, he was clean the entire time.
Yes, and that's the important part, is letting people decide or discover on their own that that's what you're about. You know, I feel the
Yeah.
same way about lineups that are like women comedy, women comedian. It's like, no, no, no. Let them watch the whole show, have a great time, and then realize afterward, wait a second, every person on that lineup was a woman.
Yeah.
How interesting, you know, or like anything that's marketed like that. It's like,
I hate labels.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been a really fantastic conversation. For anybody listening, you have a podcast and it's called Comedy in Christ. And which is there more to it than Christian comedians being interviewed talking about their lives and their stories?
So it's not really just Christian comedians. I have pastors. I have music leaders. I'm trying to get rappers. Anybody
Nice.
who has a want to do entertainment in
Yeah.
any aspect of life,
Yeah.
um, I'll talk.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I highly recommend anybody listening to this go check it out. Even if you're an atheist, even if you're agnostic, Chris, you're really entertaining. You're really funny. You're really nice too. Like last time we talked,
Oh,
your life
thank
story
you.
ended up just boggling my mind. You like casually dropped that you weighed like 500 pounds. And I just remember being shocked. And then we talked about YouTube channels we like to watch and things like that. But yeah, so I'm going to link all of your social medias and things that you provided in the notes. But do you have any parting words for us or anything you want us to take away from this episode?
This has been an absolute blast, and thank you for the opportunity.